Hi, I'm Lance Hendricks, and you're watching Brian Lomax's Movie Talk.
I've gone back recently and I've watched all the Nightmare on Elm Street films. Now I am reviewing them all on my channel, so if you want to find out detailed reviews of what I think about these films, then please check those out. But what I thought I'd do here is rank them. So basically rate them and rank them in order of preference, starting with the least favourite and finishing obviously with my favourite of the franchise. First up, and this is my least favourite of the franchise, what I consider to be an absolute stinker, in fact, that's A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6, Freddys Dead. Yeah, it stinks. Now, it's impossible to watch now on a regular television because it was made for 3D. It was meant to be the kind of 3D where you stick the glasses on at home, but it just doesn't work. And the bits that are meant to be in 3D have some really bad special effects. So when you're just watching it in a 2D version, it does not translate well at all. Beyond that, the story is all over the place. The characterizations are really poor. The performances are even worse. I give Freddys Dead a 2 out of 5. Next up is A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master. Now, I liked kind of where they wanted to go with this film, where they were trying to go with this film, but yeah, it don't work. Again, because the story is all over the place. It's just, they have this idea and it doesn't quite come to fruition. Now, I think if I remember, this is the one that was written during a writer's strike, and pretty much everybody had involvement in the script, and it really shows. It's not a good film. It has some good special effects in it, some really good body horror stuff, the kind of thing that Tom Savini would be proud of, but all the little parts that make up the film don't really add up to much, so not a great film. So I'm going to give The Dream Master a 2 out of 5. Next up is A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddys Revenge. Now this is obviously the first sequel, and they kind of just got rid of all the main characters from the first one, particularly the role played by Heather Langenkamp, Nancy, and I think the film suffers for it because we don't really address that ending from the first film. It's just gone. I appreciate its attempt to kind of relate some real world problems, real world issues, real world things that teenagers have to go through and deal with to the film. You know, some of the best horror does that, but it just doesn't do it well. That's the problem. I'm going to give this film a 2.5 out of 5. And so in my number 6 spot we have A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. This was the direct sequel to Part 4, and obviously that is a direct sequel because it's 4 and 5, but what I mean is they continued that story on. So whereas they didn't do that with the original film, when they went to the first sequel they just kind of changed the story completely, this is the first time that actually we pick up where we left off and we follow those characters again. So I like that they do that. I like that we stick with these characters, and I like that the female character in this, I can't remember her name just off the top of my head, but she becomes the Nancy character. She becomes the main character, and I actually prefer her to Nancy, the actress. I wouldn't say writing, I wouldn't say her character is written better than Nancy was. I think Nancy definitely was written better, but I think she's played better. And I just feel like the story for this one is just a little bit tighter than Part 4. I feel like it's not as all over the place. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. At number 5 for me is the remake of the first film. So A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake. It doesn't have the humour of kind of what kind of became prevalent throughout the series. Now, for those who didn't like the humour, me kind of being one of them, that's a good thing. I think as far as remakes go, this is a pretty decent one. Now, I've seen like your Texas Chainsaw Massacre remakes, your Friday the 13th remakes, your awful Rob Zombie Halloween remakes, but yeah, I do not like these remakes generally. I thought this one was actually pretty decent, and I think it's down to the concept, that original concept that Wes Craven came up with. I just think it's a really creative idea. It wasn't really a scary film on the whole, but I think that's unfair to kind of judge the scare levels of this compared to the first one, say, which I saw as a kid. Of course that would scare me as a kid, and I think if I'd have seen this one at the age that I saw the original, it would have scared me just as much, if not more so. So yeah, I think it's a decent film. I'll give it a 3 out of 5. And my number 4 spot is Freddy vs. Jason. That's right, it's the franchise crossover that got the hero of Nightmare on Elm Street and the hero of Friday the 13th, Jason Voorhees, stuck them together for a bit of a Royal Rumble. It's just a good kind of roller coaster ride. It's a fun film. It's a film that knows its audience and knows where it's come from. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Really enjoyable ride. Again, still only something I would call a good film, not a very good film or a great film. I'd give it a 3 out of 5. In the number 3 spot for me is A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. Yep, that's it. It's the Dream Warriors. This is essentially when Wes Craven came back, but kind of didn't either. He wrote the original draft of the script for this. Again, we're back to a really solid concept. It's something that Craven has excelled at when it comes to this film. He doesn't seem to come back to this franchise unless he feels he's got a really good concept. And for this, it was the idea that Heather from Nancy, played by Heather Langenkamp from the original film, would come back and teach these kids who are going through horrible nightmares, who have this trouble, who all have this shared dream about Freddy Krueger, and she helps them to become warriors in their dream. That concept is really good. Plus, you know, you're bringing back this character that everyone loved from the first film, and it just adds weight, I think, to the franchise by having an already established character return like that. A really good example of the genre, and I give it a 3.5 out of 5. Now, these final two, I honestly couldn't decide, and you obviously know, if you're a fan, which two they are, but I couldn't decide which to put in number 1, and I think just by virtue of it being original at the time, I'm going to put the first film at number 1, which means that Wes Craven's New Nightmare is at number 2. Now, what I love about this film is just how it is a sequel, but it isn't. It's an original film in its own right that kind of acknowledges that the original series are just movies, and it's really creative. Again, Wes Craven showing his creativity there, coming back and doing something completely different with the franchise, but making it work, making it still fit in with that franchise. I feel actually in this film, Robert Englund is the weakest aspect. Not when he's playing Freddy, but when he's playing himself. But beyond that, yeah, 3.5 out of 5. And so we're left with the original 1984 film. A classic, I think. It's lost some of its sheen over the years as far as I'm concerned. I wanted to give it a 4 out of 5 when I saw it recently, just because of what I remembered about it, but I couldn't quite bring myself to do that. I give it a 3.5 out of 5. And the reason is the ending. The last act has so many problems, I feel, that I can't quite bring myself to give it a 4 out of 5. Despite that, this is still a classic in the sense of what it did for the genre, in the sense of its creativity, the ideas. It's so full of ideas, and in the sense that it gave us this iconic cinematic figure in Freddy Krueger. So by all those standards, yeah, this is a really great film, a classic film, one that definitely deserves to be watched. So there you go, there is my ranking of all the films in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise.